Okay. So yesterday, based on the final pshat and rava of the Mishnah, somebody was walking down the street and he sees a para that's on the floor, and this para is stubborn. It's not going to get up anytime soon. It doesn't want to get up. And he ate his Wheaties that day. He was strong and powerful. And he said, I'm going to get this animal up. And if I can't get this animal up, Hareni Nazir mi bisarei. So he made this weird tonight, but then he made the same Naziris that Bishama and Basilo discuss on Daf Tes. And that is as follows. He has contradictory remarks. Hareni Nazir, but then he says Mibasari, which is not a Nazir, different type of Isser. So the way the Gemara explained it was we hold like Reb Meir that in the Moichi Dvar of Levatala, both Bisham and Misil hold that way. Both Bisham and Misil hold that we also hold like Reb Yosy, that the Gemara Dvar of Adam Mitvas, the end of what he said, Mibasari has to be equally weighted. You can't just say Hareni Nazir and ignore everything else. You have to look at Hareni Nazir and Mibasari, which means we have to interpret his statement as saying, Hareni Nazir, I changed my mind. And the whole machlokes with Shama and Basil is whether by Naziris you can change your mind, even Toich Kedibur. The Shama holds you cannot be chayzer on your Naziris, just like Hektish, even Toich Kedibur. And Basil holds that you could be chayzer, you could have charat to Toich Kedibur. That was the machlokes as we learned it 2 days ago. And in our case, in our Mishnah, Yud Amud Aleph, it's exactly that type of Naziris, except it was made on a Tanai. So we have our center stage show, which is about this contradictory type of expression. And then we have the distraction, the sideshow, which would be the Tanai that this person made to become the Nazir. And the question is, has he triggered that Tanai? So what did he say? He said, I ate my Wheaties. I'm a strong guy. I'm going to be able to get this para to stand up. According to Bishamai, that's called triggering it, even if the animal stood up by itself. Nevertheless, he intended to lift it up himself. And since he didn't succeed in lifting it up himself, he triggered it night, and therefore his Naziris is a Naziris, and that type of expression, Harei Nazir B'Basarei, works to make him into a Nazir, as Bishami said the day before. Basil says two things. First of all, you didn't trigger, because the fact that the animal stood up, even though it only stood up on its own, is enough that you shouldn't trigger it tonight, because the person's intention is just to get the animal up, not that he had to get it up with his muscles. But even if it would trigger it, Basil holds this Naziris is not a good Naziris, because Basil understands it as Hareni Nazir mi Basari, meaning Hareni Nazir, and he Toich Kedibur changed his mind with Charata, and there wouldn't be a Naziris. So that's what we learned yesterday. Now we're starting a whole new sugya. And I hope no women are listening, because this will really spook them, because they're gonna think we're already ushering in the Pesach season. Zok the Heilige Mishnah, Mos Guloi Esakos. It sounds like Pesach, but it's not. They poured him a kos of wine. Omar, and he said, Hareni Nazir, remember, I am a Nazir from this kos of wine. Hareza Nazir, in fact, that's a good Kabbalas Nazirs. Now, what's interesting to note is it seems like he's saying, I'm only a Nazir from wine and not from Tumah. Is that a good Kabbalas Naziris? So we learned a couple of days ago a machlokes between the Chachamim and Reb Shimon. The Chachamim said, if you even accept upon yourself one component of Naziris, such as not drink, it morphs into a full Naziris. While on the other hand, Reb Shimon said, unless you're makabel upon yourself all of the restrictions of Naziris, you're not a Nazir at all. So Reb Shimon holds, if you say Hareni Nazir Stam, then you're a Nazir, because you were makabel upon yourself all of the facets of Naziris. But if you say Hareni Nazir and you specify one thing, such as from wine, Now you're not going to be a Nazir at all until you list off all of the chiyuvim of Nazirs. So the Kshaila is our Mishnah here that said, Hareini Nazir mi menu. I'm a Nazir from the wine. Would Rab Shimon agree to this? At first glance, it seems like Rab Shimon wouldn't agree to this, because Rab Shimon holds if you only accept upon yourself one of the rules of Naziris, you're not a Nazir. So the Rishonim discuss this, and the Rishonim say that could be it's different over here, because here he didn't specify one item like Hareini Nazir miyayin. He said mimenu, from it. From it is a vague term. From it could mean a yad for every type of Kabbalah's Naziris, for every one of the restrictions of Naziris. And could be Reb Shimon would agree here. Maybe where does Reb Shimon say you have to be Makabal of full Naziris, or it's not a Naziris at all? That's if you specified one of the prohibitions. Here, all you said was mimenu, from it. That Reb Shimon would agree would be a full Naziris. So I raise a Nazir. Now the norm is, morning of Duvi. The norm is when the Mishnah quotes a halacha, and then the Mishnah cites a story, the story is usually illustrating and supporting the halacha. So let's look at this story. Ma'isa be'isha achas. There was once a woman. So as a shikura, she was a shikr. Yosy Phillips' mother, my wife once met her in New York about 15 years ago when Yosy had just moved to Toronto. And she's told my wife, ever since my son moved to Toronto, I became a shikr. Ich schicke geld, ich schicke packages, ich schicke Sachen. I became a shikr. So I'm not sure if this is the type of shikr that the Mishnah is referring to. But my achas, so hoisha shikura, umozgu losakois. She was drunk, and they poured her a kois of wine. Va'omer, and she said, Hareina nizira mimenu. So it's exactly the case that the Mishnah quoted above as paskening, that it's a full nazir. And what did the Chachamim pasken? Amr Chachamim loy niskav nazu ela loymar hareyu alai karban. It's not a Kabbalas Naziris. All she means to say is this particular cup of wine is usher to me, which is very counterintuitive because the Mishnah just brought a story that contradicts the Psak of the Mishnah. Break the Gemara, my salista. Since when do you bring a story to contradict the halacha that the Tana just cited? Amrit Reisha Hareza Nazir. The Mishnah first sets the halacha that if you say Hareini Nazir Mimenu, you're a Nazir. V'hader Tani Maisa, and then it cites a story. The Isha Achas Alma Bahai Huda Aser Hayenachrina Shari. So there might be a difference. So we're going to see the Gemara. In fact, there is no difference. Yesterday we learned when you can say Chesura Mechsura. You can say Chesura Mechsura when the focus of the Mishnah is on this subject. A, and B is, it's clear from the Mishnah that it requires some editing because the Mishnah as it's written is just not understandable. So this is what the Mishnah meant to say. If they poured from a kois, the Amar Hareini Nazir Mimenu, and he said, I'm a Nazir, Hareza Nazir. That's a regular Nazir. But Vim Shikru, if he's a Shikr, and we know how it works, when someone's drunk, everybody around him finds it amusing to ply him with more booze. Have another one, have another one. The very first Simchas Torah that I went to Los Angeles to my shver, I made Kiddush. And made me feel good. So my brother says, Yosy, hast du gemacht Kiddush? I said, yeah. Nein, ich meine, du hast nicht gemacht Kiddush. Mach Kiddush noch einmal. By the time we finished with my Kiddush, I had put down almost a full bottle of Shivas. And I was so drunk that I was actually still tipsy on the airplane on the way home the next day. And my shver was convinced till the day he died that his daughter married a full-blown alcoholic. He was convinced that I'm an alcoholic and that he married his daughter off and she's abused by her alcoholic husband. There was nothing I would be able to do to change his mind.
I mean, it would have helped if you stopped drinking.
Correct. He's not shikr. That's correct. That's exactly what the Chesur Mechsur is. In a normal case, if someone poured you a drink and you weren't shikr and you said already nazir mimenu, then you're a nazir. But if you're a shikr and there's people that are trying to ply you with more booze because they find it entertaining, no, her das is 100%. We're going to get into that. It's a very important point. So if you're drunk and they're trying to ply you with more booze, and then you say already nazir mimenu, you're not really trying to become a nazir. You're just trying to push them off and resist their temptation to drink more. And therefore, ein a nazir. He never or she never had any intention of being makabel upon herself Naziris, even though she used the word Naziris. My timer. Why do we say that? It's commando Amar Hare like Karbadu. It's as if she said this particular glass of wine is also to me like a carbon. So if that's what she meant, or he meant, depending on if he's shikr or she's shikr, why didn't he just say so? I'm not drinking this wine. The wine that you're offering me is on me like a carbon. I made a nether on it. Why did he use the word Naziris if he didn't mean Naziris? So Gemara Sabar, he's thinking to himself, if I just answer myself from this glass of wine, they're surely going to bring me another bottle because they're trying to ply me with booze. They're going to cause me problems. Therefore, let me tell them I'm a complete nazir, the psikalu, so that they'll stop bothering me to drink. Where that exact thing happened, she was shikr, they were applying her with booze, and in order for her to stop them, she said that she's a nazira. But really all she meant was to answer herself, hana, from that cup of wine. I guess that temptation was too much. It goes to show that people, they're immoral. They're applying some with booze for their own entertainment, even though they know it's not good for the person. It's like the bottle of milk where a guy writes, Mak Gomer, don't take my milk, and it kept on getting stolen. When he wrote Chalav Stam, suddenly nobody took it. She said, Nazir, Nazir, that we want best. We don't have no problem messing up your life and getting you drunk. That's not a problem. Nazir, that we're going to back off from. So you have to know your strategies when you're dealing with these people. So Dubi brought up a very important point. Someone who's shikr, are they of sound mind to be able to make a nether at all? Why is it a nether? Why is it anything? If she's a shikr, which is what Dubi raised, right? You ask her, she's someone. Well, so that's a good point. So we really have to delve into what shikr means. Right. So we have to delve into what shikr means. So the Shulchan Aruch discusses shikr l'gabi davening. Are you allowed to daven when you're drunk? So there's actually four. Apparently, Muslim at Simchas Torah, you're allowed to. So there's actually so there's actually 4 levels of drunkenness that are discussed in the Shulchan Aruch. Level 1 is you had a shot, but you're not drunk. You feel fine. That's one level of shikr. You wouldn't be allowed to go into the Beis Hamikdash if you were a kohen, if you had a shot. So are you allowed to daven? Now, in all of these levels, depending on the situation, could you be machmer? You have to be machmer not to daven or not. What if, sure, you shouldn't daven after you had a drink, but what if you're about to miss the month Krishma? You're about to miss the month Tefillah. You're up against the end and you drank. So Avad, the person will say daven. Well, then there's another level. Then there's a level where you're a little bit, you're not 100% clear. You probably wouldn't be allowed to drive, but you're still functioning. You're not slurring your words. You still know what you're doing. That's a higher level of shikr, right? I mean, each person is different. That's right. Each person is different, depending on how you handle your booze. So, because one shot takes him out. Then there's a level of where you're tipsy, you're slurring your words, and then there's the highest level of shikris, which is shikrusa shaloit. Loit slept with his own daughter, right? That's how shikr he was. So there's different levels of shikris. So the shikris that we're talking about here cannot mean shikrusa shaloit, because then her kabbalas naziris wouldn't be a kabbalas naziris, nor would her kabbalas nether be a kabbalas nether. So it must be speaking that she knows she's drank too much, but she's still of sound enough mind to make a nether, and that really deals with Shmuel, what Shmuel brought up. But one of the Rishonim say a very fascinating shot. Shikari doesn't mean she's actually drunk. It means she's an alcoholic. So she's perfectly sober now, but she's an alcoholic. And socially, people are trying to get her to drink. So she says Hareni Nazir. There, she's stone cold solid. Her Nidarim are good Nidarim. She's just joined AA. Okay, so those are the different shatim in this Gemara. Beautiful, nice Gemara. Next, Hareni Nazir Almanas She'ehi Shoyse Yayin Umetamal Mason. I'm going to be a Nazir, but with a Tanai. Almanas, that I should be able to drink wine, and I should be able to become Tomei. So it's one or the other, because if you could do both, you're no longer a Nazir. So someone made a Naziris with conditions. The law is, I raise a Nazir, he's a Nazir anyway, the Asr b'chulam, and he's Asr on all of them. Now there's a Shiloh over here, where the Gemara is going to soon tell us that this is Masna al Mashakasa B'Torah. Now maybe I'll wait till the Gemara raises that. But right now, our Mishnah tells us, if you make a Naziris with a Tanai, clearly your Tanai does not work, and you're a full-blown Nazir. That's case A. I'm sorry? Correct. So it's a Masna al Mashakos of B'Torah. Exactly. A general Tanai we know works. There's a parish of Bnei Gad and Bnei Ruvain. The question is, does Masna al Mashakos of B'Torah work? What about the following case? Yoidei ani sheyesh Nazir. Someone who's Makabal Naziris, and he said, I knew that there's such a thing called Naziris. Aval, any Yodeya, I didn't know, Shanazir Asr B'Yayin. So Toysus clarifies what this means. Aval, any Yodeya, Shanazir Asr B'Yayin, Kloimar, Shar halachos kibalti alai. When I was Makabal the Naziris, I thought it meant Tumah. That's what I thought it meant. So that's what I accepted upon myself. Levad Misr Yayin, Shaloi Kibalti. I never accepted upon myself an issue to drink wine, because I didn't realize that that's what Nazir entailed. Levi Shaloi Yadati, Shanazir Asr B'Yayin. So the halacha is, Dr. Mishnah, Hareza Asr. The Tanakama holds this is a full-blown Naziris. You were Makabal Naziris, so you didn't know what it was. But once you're Makabal Naziris, you're a Nazir. Rab Shimon Mater, Rab Shimon holds no, it's not a good Kabbalah Naziris. Let's see Tosfos who explains it. Have a Nazir l'tamayu deloil. It's consistent to the machlokes that we cited earlier, that we had a couple of days ago, where Rab Shimon holds, unless you're Makabal all of the Naziris, all of the restrictions of Naziris, it's not a Kabbalah at all. Well, the Rabbanan held that even if you're Makabal one part of Naziris, it automatically morphs into a full Naziris. So the Rabbanan have a Nazir l'tamayu deloil. Another el mechad have a Nazir. For Rab Shimon Mater, Bazil Tamei, the Amar Ad Shiyazim Mikulan. So it was Nav Gimel, it was last week. So that is this machlokes. So this machlokes is the exact same machlokes that we already had on Nav Gimel Amud Beis. Just to point out, on Nav Gimel Amud Beis, the Mishnah said stam that if you're Makabel part of Naziris, it's a full Naziris. And the Gemara said Masnis in the Loiki Aitana. It's not like Rab Shimon. It's not like this Rab Shimon. Yoidei, now we have a third case. Yoidei Shanazir Asr B'Yayin. I knew full well when I accepted upon my Naziris all of the restrictions that it comes along with. Aval Sover Hayisi, I thought Shechachamim Atirli, that the Chachamim would be materit for me. Why? Mipnei she'einani yochel lichyos el v'yayin. I'm addicted to wine, and I know for sure that I assume the Chachamim would make that variant for me and allow me to drink wine. Or I need a job, and my job is an undertaker, and I can't afford not to work, and I have to become Tomei because I have to deal with Mason. So I know if the Chachamim will be matter from me. So once again we have a machlokes hareza mutter. According to the Chachamim, it's not in the Naziris, which is very interesting because it's exactly the opposite position that he took a moment ago. Rabbi Shimon Oyser, once again, is interesting because it's exactly the opposite position that he just took a moment ago. So let's see the Tosfos. Yedei ani shanazir asher b'yayin, aval ani sover hayisi. I thought shachachamim matirin. Why? Mipnei she'eni yochel lichyos el b'yayin, oy mipnei shani kover esamesim. Kloimar shani tzarich litamish b'hem. I need to become tamei because I have a job. V'litapel b'hen v'schar machmas doichti. Since I struggle, this is my job, and I need to do it. I never had intention to accept upon myself an Isur Yayin because I need the wine to survive. Or why? Or being Matama, I didn't accept that restriction of Naziris. So I raise a mutter according to the Tanakama, Reb Shimon Eiser, the Gemara Porach Ibcha Hava Leila Misti. The Gemara is going to ask, this seems like they switched positions. What's pshat in this case? Why would it be different? Frag the Gemara, V'liv Lagnami Reb Shimon Bereisha. So let's look. Our Mishnah had three cases. The first case, it seems like no one disputes. It's not challenged. And that is, Almanas does not work. Yet, the second case, where he says, I was never makabel upon myself, Naziris of Yayin, because I didn't know that it's Osir, there, Reb Shimon holds he's not an Osir. So the question is, what's the difference between the second case and the first case? In both cases, he wanted Naziris, but he wanted not to accept certain restrictions. Why is it that Reb Shimon says in the second case that it's not a good Kabbalah's Naziris, yet in the first case, he says it is a Kabbalah's Naziris? But Livik Nami Reb Shimon Bereisha. Reb Shimon Levi says you're 100% right. In fact, Cholak Hayir Reb Shimon Aparesha. So when Reb Shimon here says Matir, he means not only Matir in the case of Yedayani, but he's even being Matir in the case of a Manash, Sheishoy Sheyayid and Mutabal Ames. Ravina Amar Bereisha Loi Polik Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon agrees in the Reisha that it's a full Naziris. Now, what is the difference, Lamaisa, in practicality between the Reisha and the Sefer? The Reisha is I'm being makabel upon myself a full Naziris with a Tanai. The second case is I am not being makabel upon myself a full Naziris. So there's two ways of attempting to only accept part of the restrictions. One is with a Tanai, which even if Shimon agrees does not work, and the one is by saying I'm simply not accepting upon myself that restriction. And Ravina makes that distinction. So Ravina Amar Bereisha Loi Polik Reb Shimon. Why not? My timer, because his strategy, his tactic to use it tonight does not work. My timing Mishum Dahavale Masna Al Mashakosa V'Torah. You cannot modify Naziris of the Torah. The Chol Masna Al Mashakosa V'Torah to Noi Batel. So let's see what the Toshva says. They have a Masna Al Mashakosa V'Torah. The Cheshamar Hareini Nazir. When he said Hareini Nazir, Chaya L'Lov Naziris L'Chol Mili. In that instant, the Naziris came upon him. Because there's a very big question. A person says, Harei at Mukudeshes Li, Al Manas, that I shouldn't be Mechuyev in Sher Ksus or Ayna. The halach is he's Mikudeshes, and he's Mechuyev in everything. Why? Once again, because you cannot be Masal Mashakos of Torah. But let me ask you a question. If I said I only want to marry this woman, Al Manas, that I don't have to be Mechuyev in Sher Ksus or Ayna, so it's not fair. It shouldn't be a Kedushin. Maskim can be Masal Mashakos of Torah, but the Kedushin shouldn't be Chal either. I don't want the Kedushin under those premises. So the teretz is, that is precisely what we mean by Masal Mashakos of Torah. Who said a Tanai works? B'chlal. The only reason why a Tanai works, even in a regular monetary transaction, is because there's a chiddush of the parsha of Tanoim that we see in the parsha of Bnei Gad, Bnei Ruvain, that if the Tanai is presented in a very specific fashion, then the Tanai works. But if not, Tanai doesn't work. So that's the whole verse. When you said Hareini Nazir, Almanas, the Tanai doesn't work. But the Hareini Nazir does work. And therefore you become a Nazir. Same thing with the Kedushin. Hareid Mekadashli, that works. You want to now use a new mechanism of Tanai? That doesn't work anymore. So once you say Hareid Mekadashli, you can't say I don't want it. If you didn't want it, you shouldn't have said it. So that's, I think that's what Tosfos is sort of alluding to. The Cheshamar Hareini Nazir, Chai Lalav Naziris L'chol Mili. Instantly, the moment he uttered those words, the full Naziris came upon him. The Chiyomar Almanas, and now that he wants to modify it with the new concept of Tanai, Matla Tanai al Mashakos of Torah. He's trying to put a Tanai on the transaction that's listed in the Torah, Ubatla Tanai, and therefore the Tanai is Batla. Frag Tosh is a very, very important kasha. Why did the Gemara say that the reason why the Tanai doesn't work is because of Masnal Mashakos of Torah? There's another reason why the Tanai can't work. The the Naziris, efshar lakayim al yidei shliach. You cannot be Mekayim Naziris al yidei shliach. And there's a rule, Tamruna Bamadir, we learned in Perek HaMadir, when the Gemara is listing the conditions required in order to make a Tanai, the Be'inan Tanai Dumya, the B'negad of Neruvain, Sheniskayim Hamaisa, al yidei Yehoshua. The actual transaction was executed by Yehoshua, not by Moshe. So you shliach Moshe. Only if it's a transaction that you can do al yidei shlichos, and the way Tosfos explains it in Ksubis is if you could do it al yidei shlichos, it shows you have a very strong control over this transaction. Then you can put conditions on it. But if you don't control it to the point that you can delegate it, then you cannot make a Tanai. You can't be a Nazir for somebody else. There's no shlichus when it comes to Naziris. So that in and of itself is a reason why the Tanai wouldn't work, even if it wasn't Masna Alma Shakasa B'Torah. The Yesh Loimer Zok Tosfos, Acharei Shacherim Yecholim Lahavi Karbanos Naziros Tachtov. The fact that someone could bring your karbanos on your behalf, Nechshav Keilu Kol Hamaisa Yochel Lasos al yidei shliach. The fact that one part of Naziris you could do through a shliach, and that is someone can bring your karbanos on your behalf, that makes it like the entire Naziris is al yidei shliach, which gives support to the very first Tosfos, or the Tosfos in the first daf of our Masechta, that said that Naziris really belonged in Kachim, because it's a Kachim sugya, which means that is the main point of it. And the main point of it is Yochel Lasos al yidei shliach. Now there's a very big kasha from Rabbi Akiva Eiger. There's a very big kasha from Rabbi Akiva Eiger. So there's two kashas from Rabbi Akiva Eiger. So let's look at the Gilyon Hashas. The first question is, Lo yadati mayil mahai mehai. What's the big deal? Why is Tosfos so excited about using the reason why you can't have a Tanai? Because it's something you can't do shlichus. Masla Masha B'Torah is an equally powerful reason why a Tanai wouldn't work. So why is Tosfos making such a big deal about the other option? V'adrabah, Taima, the Evshel Akaima de Shliach, Loi Brira. It's not even such a good reason. The Gemara's reason of Masla Masha B'Torah is a much better reason. So Yesh Plukta B'Zebi Yavamas. In fact, there's a machlokes about this in Yavamas, whether or not you need Yochel Akaima de Shliach. Mishum Hachli Nokad Yoyser. So why is Tosfos fussing about why the Gemara didn't use the reason why Tanai doesn't work is because you cannot do Naziris through a shlichus? The Gemara's reason is a better reason. So I don't know what's bothering Tosfos. But the next Rabbi Akiva Eiger is a real problem, because Tosfos is saying the reason why Naziris is Yochel Lasos al yidei shliach is the karbanos. Zok Rabbi Akiva Eiger, and we had the same Rabbi Akiva Eiger in Nedarim. Kashali frekt Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Ta'adayin eich yitur tahid in Nedarim roish perk velu Nedarim. We learned there it says kainem rechitas oilam im erchatz. Someone made a t'nai. I will not be able to make rechitza forever if I bathe today. That's a t'nai. Ha-Nedarim yevshir l'kayim al yidei shliach. You can never be mekayim in that through a shliach, and there's no carbon at the end like there is by Naziris. So how do you, Tosfos, understand Nedarim? Naziris you might have dealt with by saying there's a carbon at the end, but there is no carbon at the end of a Nedarim. Yet by Nedarim we see shlichus does not work. Yet you can still make a t'nai. V'tzarachian Rabbi Akiva Eiger bleibt schwer. How is it that you can make a t'nai by Nedarim if Nedarim is something that you cannot fulfill through a shliach? That is Rabbi Akiva Eiger's kasha. So there are achronim who explain it. Could be Rabbi Chanan Wasserman. We had this back in the Nedarim, and he explains that the only time you need the mechanics of Tanai is if you're dealing with a transaction like a money transaction with somebody else. So in order for my Tanai to work and impact our monetary transaction, you need the mechanics of Tanai. But when it comes to the Nedarim and Naziris, where you're just bringing an Isser upon yourself, there you don't even need the mechanism of Tanai. It's between you and yourself. You do not need the mechanism of Tanai at all. And that's why there are those who would argue with Tosfos would hold that The reason why a Nazir doesn't have a problem in Yochel Asa Shliach is because Nazirus doesn't conform to all the rules of Tanai. But you still have the problem of Masna al Mashakosa B'Tayr. Okay, so let's see back where we're holding. So now there was a question, Reb Shimon, does he argue on the first case or not? According to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, he argues on the first case. And according to Ravina, he does not argue. He agrees with the first case because the first case was a case of Mashal Mashakosa B'Tayr. Frank the Gemara, that's a very good argument. The first case is Mashal Mashakosa B'Tayr, and in fact, Reb Shimon should agree. Yet Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says that Reb Shimon argues in the ratio. What's his reasoning? Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Amalach, Hai Almanas Kechutz Dami. When he says Almanas, what it really means, it works like chutz. Chutz is the same as the first case, meaning, chutz is the same as the second case, meaning I'm not makabel upon myself a prohibition for wine, but I am makabel upon myself of the Naziris. That does work according to Reb Shimon, and therefore, when someone says Almanas, we say it works using the chutz mechanism. Tanya Kabasa de Ravina. We have proof to Ravina, in fact, that when someone says Almanas, it's not chutz, rather it's masna mashakosa b'tay. Because the Brisa says, Amar hareini nazir Almanas she'ehei shoyse yayin umitama l'meisim hareza nazir v'osher b'chulan mipnei shehu masna mashakosa b'tayra v'chala masna mashakosa b'tayra Tanoi bottle. His mice is kaim and his tnai is bottle. So you see quite clearly that it's not kechutz. You see quite clearly that when you say almanas, it's a regular tnai, and therefore it would not work because of the problem of mas al mashakos. Now let's go to the third halach in the Mishnah. That yoidei ani shanazir asher b'yayin, but the Rabban were makel for me because I cannot survive without wine. And what did the Mishnah say? That Reb Shimon holds its usher and the Rabban holds its mutter, which is exactly the opposite position from what they held before. The Amr Reisha usher for Reb Shimon matir. Why over here are they swapping positions? Zok to Gemara, you're right. Let's change the Mishnah. Ema nami hareza usher according to the Tanakama for Reb Shimon matir. Simple. But but we have another shot where we can actually say that this last case is different. And in fact, they do take the opposite approach. Let's in fact say that Reb Shimon holds its usher and the Chachamim holds its mutter, just as our Mishnah reads. But there's an interesting twist. Hasam. Now let's stop a second. Let's remind ourselves. According to Reb Shimon, if someone says, I'm only a Nazir legabe a prohibition of wine, but not legabe anything else, Reb Shimon says that's not a good Kabbalas Naziris. The Chachamim say, if I say I already Nazir, but only from wine, that's a full Kabbalas Naziris. So there's a term, Keboiloi kach poiltoi. When you want to kasher a keli, if you used it with heat, you have to get rid of the blias with heat. So that same theory is going to be applied over here. So let's see how it manifests itself. Reisha going to Nazir mechada. He made a Nazir from only one item. Let's say I'm only accepting upon myself the prohibition of wine. Li Rabbanan da Amri Dafilu Nazir Elamayachis Mehen have a Nazir ve'aser. According to the Rabbanan, when you're being Mekabel Naziris, being Mekabel even one component becomes a full Nazir. And the Reb Shimon, the Amr Achiyazim Mikulam, and Reb Shimon said that you're not a Nazir until you accept all of the prohibitions of Naziris. And therefore it will be mutter when you're being Mekabel Naziris if you weren't Mekabel all of the prohibitions. So now let's look at the Sefer. Sefer the Nazir Michulu. In the Sefer, in fact, he made a Naziris on all of the prohibitions, but he's now being shoyal. I want to be shoyal on the wine because I can't survive the wine. I want to be shoyal on the tumah because I can't survive the tumah. The itchel mechada. He's not being shoyal on his entire Naziris. He's only being shoyal on one component of the Naziris. So Zok to Gemara, Le Rabbanan Darmri Afil Le Nazir Elamayachas Man have a Nazir. According to Rabbanan, that merely by accepting one rule of Naziris, that's a full Kabbalah. Well, on the way out, it should be the same way. Ki mitchel mechad b'nayu ishteri. If you were shoyal even on one component, you're oish Nazir. And that's where the Rabbanan said mutter. Le Rab Shimon Damar Achiyazar Mikulam. According to Rab Shimon, who says that when you're Makabal upon yourself Naziris, you have to be Makabal every single component of Naziris. Well, then Ki mitchel nami meyahu ad the mitchel mikulu. you're not ois nazir until you're shoyal on all of the components of Naziris. So in fact, on the way in, they have one machloikis. The inverse of that machloikis would be by she'ela on the way out. Gewaltig. Zog the Gemara weiter. Or we can have a whole different approach, and we could say that the Seifa of the Mishnah, the reason why Reb Shimon and the Chachamim take different sides is because it's a completely different type of nether. It's speaking with Nidrei Einchin. Nidrei Einchin, I made a nether and I didn't realize that this would be impossible for me to keep. I can't live without wine. I can't live without my job of being Mitama L'Meisik. So we have a rule about Nidrei Einchin that we learned in the Dharm. And there's a machlokes about whether or not Nidrei Einchin needs She'elas Chacham. So if you hold like the Tanakama that it's mutter, it's because Nidrei Einchin don't need She'elas Chacham, and therefore it's mutter. According to Reb Shimon, Nidrei Einchin do require She'elas Chacham, and that's why he said us. And let's see how the Gemara develops this. We plugged to the Shmuel of Rabasi. It's not we learned in the Dharm. Our bon Nedarim Hitir Chacham. There were 4 types of Nedarim that the Chachamim said are not Nedarim at all. Nidrei Zeruzin. What were Nidrei Zeruzin? If 2 people are negotiating, I want to charge 3 and you want to pay 3. But when we negotiate, I start off with the position that I want 4. And then we'll compromise to 3. You start off with the position that you only want to pay 2, and you're willing to compromise to 3. So what happens if me, the sellers, tell you, if you don't give me at least 4, if I'm willing to accept less than 4, whatever money you give me is also to me, I'm making an isser nether on it. That's how strong my position is, that I'm not going to budge from 4. And the buyer says exactly the opposite. If I pay more than 2, then when I buy it, it's going to be usher banot to me. Zok the Gemara, they really only both meant that they wanted to pay 3 and sell for 3. Therefore, no one needs a Torah Shadar. If they sell for 3, that was obvious that was meant all along. That's called Nidrei Zeruzin. Nidrei Havoi is if I make a nether that I saw 1 million people walking down the next block. Of course I didn't see it. It's an exaggeration. So I make a nether. If I didn't see 100,000 people walk by the next block, I am not going to eat pears. That's called Nidrei Havoi. Nidrei Shkagos is someone forgot something. The Tosfos brings down, I said, if I ate anything today, I'm offering me to eat his kikar. And then I ate something today. I forgot that I ate something. So it was made on a mistaken premise. And now the focus of our discussion is Nidrei Einchin. Nidrei Einchin, Tosfos tells us, is I'm trying to encourage you to eat in my house of Suda. And I'm mad at you. If you don't eat the Suda in my house tomorrow, then you should be also on pears. So you say you're makabel upon yourself, and Israel needs pears if you don't show up to his house tomorrow. And what happens? You try to come to his house, and your flight is canceled. The bridge is closed. You get stuck for a reason that's out of your control. That also is hitir chacham. But Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Asi, and Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav Asi, even though midaraisa the chachamim said that these are not nedarim, nevertheless, arba nedarim halalu trichin sheila lechacham. Midarabanan, you still have to be shoyal on the nether. You still have to be shoyal on the nether midarabanan. So Kiamrisa made to Shmuel, when I said over to Shmuel this halacha, that Rav Asi said that you need to be shoyal, Amarli told me, how could you possibly say that? Look at the Brisa, or look at the Mishnah. Tana katani hitiru chacham. The words of the Tana is they said it's mutter. So how could you possibly say that you require shelas chacham? Yat amrit trichan shelas chachamim. So in fact, we have a machlokes by a case of nidrei einchin. Do you need to be shoyal on the nether or not? This is nidrei einchin. Rabbanan Savik is Shmuel that you don't need, and that's why in our Mishnah the Rabbanan said this prohibition of wine or this prohibition to become tamei is a nidrei einchin to this person, and therefore it's mutter. You don't need any type of sheila. Rab Shimon Krabasi, who holds that even though it's nidrei einchin, you still need sheila. Tosfos asks a very, very important question. Nidrei einchin means I made a nether that I was going to come to your house, and then due to no fault of my own, some emergency, the flight was canceled. I couldn't make it. That's why it's mutter. But that's not our case over here. This is he knew in advance. So let's see what the Ran says, what the Tosha says. Nidre avoy, the fire shas of Pishmador. In time of Tosha, back to Nidre Yontin. Umidami. What is the comparison between Nidre Yontin and that Mishnah quoted and our case? Hasam b'shas haneder loyada ha'onis. At the time of the nether, he didn't know that he wouldn't be able to make it. He didn't know that his flight would be canceled. He had full intention of accepting upon himself the chiyuv to go and eat the Suda in his friend's house. And he made a full-hearted nether. That's why, according to Rabasi, you have to be shoyal. Because when he made the nether, he really meant it was a full-blown nether. The circumstances changed afterwards. When he made the nether, when he accepted upon himself the Naziris, he knew he needed wine. It's nothing new that came up. So there was never a Kabbalah Nazir. So how could you say that Reb Shimon holds a Kabasi? Even if he holds a Kabasi, here, you shouldn't need Shayla, because clearly here, when he made the nether, he knew he didn't want to be Makabal upon himself, the prohibition of wine. Zok Toshus HaChidish. And maybe even Reb Shimon would agree that you don't need to be shoyal. The Masnisin Nami Ari Sha'onis Ba'achrikin could go into B'shas HaNeder Hayubari V'chazak V'yochal Lichyosh B'layayin. When he made the nether, he didn't need wine. After he became a Nazir, something happened to him, and suddenly now he needs wine. He needed medicinal marijuana. That only happened after. So now it's similar. Now it's similar. Well, you're saying that for a joke. With the case of the undertaker, Tosha says, maybe when he accepted upon himself the Nazir, he's a rich guy, and he didn't have to work with Mason. And then after he was Makabal Naziris, he became poor, and now he needs this job. So that could be the same thing as the Nidre Oitin, which something occurred after I was Makabal Naziris. Gewaltig. Let's see the next Gemara. Hareni Nazir v'alai legaleach. Now, Motzei Shabbos, I'm going to start here because the Oilam from Daniel Finkel Shir, who are joining us, we got up to here last night. So if you stick with me to the end of the daf, then Motzei Shabbos you can come 5 minutes late, or on Shabbos as well. Hareni Nazir v'alai legaleach Nazir. So someone did a double Kabbalah. A, I'm being Makabal upon myself in Naziris. B, I'm also being Makabal upon myself to sponsor the Karbanis of another Nazir. And his friend heard, and he said the same thing. Va'ani, yes, me also. And I also am accepting upon myself to pay for the Karbanis of another Nazir. When they say Giluach, it means I'm going to facilitate the Giluach process, which is the termination of the Naziris. So Zok the Gemara, if these two people are smart, they should make a reciprocal agreement. I'll become a Nazir and I'll pay for your carbon. You became a Nazir, you pay for my carbon. So we save money at least. But you can't because you were makabel to pay for somebody else's carbon. You could pay for your own carbon, but then you have to pay for somebody else's carbon. So if you want to save, because then I only have to pay for one and you only have to pay for one. But you can't only pay for your own because you were makabel to pay somebody else's. You want to know why someone said this? If the fish didn't open his mouth, he would still be for swimming, right? So the imlav, and if they can't make this reciprocal agreement, then magalcha nazir nachem, then they'll be forced to buy two sets of karbanis, one for themselves and one for the third party whose karbanis they accepted for. Iboilu, what exactly happened? Shama chaveirai v'amar vani mahu. Because if you look at the Mishnah, it's very interesting. The Mishnah says, "V'shama chaveirai v'amar vani." So I would think vani means whatever my buddy said, I'm accepting upon myself the whole thing. But our Mishnah adds, he said vani and v'alai legalech nazir, which makes it sound like the vani only makes me into a nazir. But for the second Kabbalah, that he's going to pay for somebody else's karbanis, that he had to speak out himself. The vani wouldn't include all that. So that's what we're probing. Maybe when I say vani, I mean to accept upon myself whatever my buddy just said, not just part of what my buddy just said. What would be the halacha? Do you say vani akule dibur mashma? Whatever my friend said, and he made two commitments: A, that he's a Nazir; B, he's going to sponsor somebody else's karbanas. Oidilma apalge the dibur mashma. I'm only accepting upon myself one of the two things. Imtim saloimer apalge the dibur mashma. And if you're going to say that when I say vani, in response to my friend's double commitment, I only mean to accept upon myself one of the two items that my friend committed to, well, Aresha Seifa. Am I committing to the first thing that he said or the second thing that he said? So in our Mishnah, if he would have just said vani, does that mean vani that I'll be a Nazir? Or does vani mean I'll pay for somebody else's karbanas, but I won't be a Nazir? Tashma, look at our Mishnah. It says vani and v'alai legaleich Nazir. Midakamer vani v'alai. Since in our Mishnah, in order to be mechayev the second guy, both Naziris, as well as paying for somebody else's karbanas, he had to say vani and v'alai. Shemamina vani apalge de diburei. It clearly shows that if he only would have said vani, he wouldn't have been mechayev in both of those commitments. Alma in apalge de dibur mashma. You're right about that. Exactly like Dovi said. Miu areisha yasefa. Right? We still have the same question. If he would have only said vani, what commitment would have he been mechuyev in the Naziris or in paying somebody else's carbon? Zaktamar mina. We actually, from the same Mishnah, our Mishnah, we can extract that information as well. Midika amar v'alai legaleach. Since he said v'alai legaleach, well, shema mina vani atchil tibur mashma. Right? Because if the vani meant legaleach, then he would have had to add I'm also a Nazir. He said vani and I'll also pay for someone's carbon. So obviously the vani covers the first commitment and the v'alai legaleach covers the second commitment. Amalei Rav Huna b'rei Rabbi Shula Rava. Mimai, what is the right? Mimai dahachi. Let's say vani by itself would have been a full commitment of both things that his friend said. You're going to ask me a question in our Mishnah, why did he have to add the v'alai? V'imishum v'alai, my kamar. If you're going to ask me that why did he say v'alai for? Why was it necessary in our Mishnah for him to say v'alai? And Yechanami, it wasn't necessary, but he wanted to talk some more. V'alai b'hamilsa. He's just saying that I want this as well. Not necessarily that if he wouldn't have said it, it wouldn't be included in his commitment, but he's saying it anyway. And I'll prove to you that that's the case. If you're not going to agree to me that sometimes you'll be redundant, and even though you said vani and it includes a full commitment, you'll still add valai. The Katani Seifa, the Seifa says, Harei alai ligaleach chatzi nazir. Someone said, Harei alai ligaleach chatzi nazir. I guess it means I'll pay for half the karbanis. V'shama chaveiroi, and his friend heard, v'amar vani alai legaleach chatzi nazir. So there, in the second case, there's only one commitment here, right? Gilu chatzi nazir, and there he said vani and valai. So you see, sometimes a person will repeat himself, but it doesn't prove that if he didn't, the vani alone would have been enough. V'amar vani alai legaleach chatzi nazir. There weren't even two commitments. So why did he need to say both? What do you have to say? He's saying that ani, and he's being more clear. Hachanami. So here in the ratio, you could say the same thing. Maybe vani includes both things, and he's just speaking it out again. That's not a good shot. Shricha, Seifa Shricha, if you say in the Resha he needed to save a alai, like we're arguing, in the Seifa it surely wasn't necessary. We can argue Tani Seifa, the Shricha, Mishum Resha, the Shricha. Once it put in the alai in the Resha, because there it was needed, so the Tana tries to use parallel Lashonis, so he used a parallel Lashon, but about he didn't need to say it. Eli Amrit Resha Shricha and Seifa Shricha. And if you're going to say that you didn't need either one, well, Tani Seifet La Tricha, Mishum Reisha, Eliyamet Reisha La Tricha, the Seifet La Tricha, Tani Reisha La Tricha, but Tani Seifet La Tricha, it should have left it out completely. If it wasn't needed both in the Reisha and in the Seifet, it should be eliminated. Elamai, you have a raya that in the Reisha it was needed. And that's why we have a raya that Ba'ani alone only means the Kabbalah's Naziris, and the Ba'alai to pay for someone else's Karbanis is needed to show his commitment to the second item. Okay, we'll stop here and we will be Mamshech Bez Hashem tomorrow.